Chof Hey Amud Aleph, the second line from the top. Karpov Yomi Masechet Eruvin. If you have a karpov that's more than a Masechet, so it was the walls were not made to surround the residential area, and therefore you're not allowed to be metaltel in this karpov. And now he wants to reduce the size so that it's not more than a Masechet to enable him to carry. So miyot be alona is we did it by planting trees there. That's not considered a miyot because it's still an area planted with trees. It's still usable for residential purposes. So that does not take away, does not reduce the size of the Masechet, because those trees serve as a function for the residents or for residential use. They use it for shade, etc. It's used for scenery. So that is not considered to be a miyut, doesn't take away from the size of the Yomi Masechet. Those are considered to be part and parcel of a residential use. But if he built a pillar over there, which is 10 tvachim high and 4 wide, then have a miyut, and that's considered a miyut because the pillar serves no function for the residential use, and the size of it, if the size of it is enough to reduce the Masechet, the Yomi Masechet, so that it's not more than a Masechet, then it's have a miyut and he's allowed to carry. But if the size of the Amud is less than Gimel, if the width is less than 3 tvachim, that's not considered to be a miyut. That's not considered to be a davar chashuv. It's not considered to be independently chashuv, and therefore it does not reduce the size of the Yomi Masechet. It's considered to be just something that is vital to the karpov itself. Migimel va'adalet. So now we said if it's 4 wide, 10 high, it is a miyut. If it's less than Gimel, less than 3, it's not chashuv, it's not a miyut. Migimel va'adalet. If it's between 3 and 4 tvachim wide, Rabbi Amar have a miyut. He says it is a miyut. Rabbi Amar loy have a miyut. Rabbi Amar have a miyut says a miyut on nafik mitaris lovad. You see that it has chashivas because within 3 we say lovad. Within 3 we say if an item is within 3 of so for instance, if you have a pillar that's within, or mechitza that's within 3 of the ground, so it's considered, this space is not considered significant. It's, therefore, we view it, the halacha mishmisin as it extends to the ground. But if it's within 3, if it's less than 3, we say lavud. It's not considered significant. More than 3, it is considered significant. That gap is a gap, and we do not say lavud to extend it down to the ground, to the bottom. So once you see, Rabbah says that megimel avadal, once it's between 3 and 4, it's still considered to be a miyut because once it's now nafik mitaris lavud, we see that it's considered to be a significant area. We don't say lavud, we don't say we view it as being extended to the bottom, to the ground. So we see that that gap is considered to be a significant area. Similarly, the pillar is considered to be something significant to reduce the size of the Masechet. So Rabbah says it's have a miyut and nafal mitaris love. Rabbah marley have a miyut came to have a malkam down like chashuv. But Rabbah says no. In order to have something that has a chashuv and malkam, we see that in order, for instance, we say to something be munach anocha has been a malkam dalet al dalet. For an item to have its own significance, it has to be at least dalet. So therefore, he says it's not considered significant. It's not a miyut. So now we have a similar machlokes in a case where he has a karpov that's more than a Masechet, and the issue over here is not trying to minimize the size of it, but originally it was loy hukav ladira. When the walls were constructed, it did not have a residential purpose. Later, then afterwards, it has a residential purpose. But now he has to construct new walls. So we have a similar machlokes is what constitutes building a new wall. If he's just adding on to the height or the thickness of an existing wall, if he's just adding on to an existing wall, that's not considered making a new mechitza. He's now building a new mechitza. How close, how far that can he build it in order to be considered a new wall. So, for instance, let's say he had so there was the karpov, it was more than a base aside. He wants to build a new wall. So he builds a new wall, and there's a gap over here between the existing wall and the new wall. Now, how much does he have to distance this wall? How far does he have to distance this wall? If he just builds it right next to this wall, he's not building a new wall. He's just adding to an existing wall. Within what gap do we say, oh, this is far enough away that this is considered a new wall, and now he's making this new wall and he's makif it ladir for residential purpose, and therefore it's now mutter to carry. So we have the same type of machlekes here. If he distanced it 4 tvachim and he made the mechitza, then we say, oh, it works. Because this is clearly a new wall. This gap, this distance is a makom chashuv. This is considered a new wall. Palchas megimel lo yhayal. But if it's within gimel, if the new wall is right within 3, then that's not a chashuv distance, and therefore it's not considered a new wall. It's considered to be being meisif on an existing wall. Megimel vad daled. If the distance between 3 and 4, so the same machlekes. Rav Amar Hayil, he says it helps. And Rav Amar Hayil, but Rav Amar Ein Amoyel. Rav Amar Hayil, he says that it's effective. Why is that? Because once you have 3, this is a significant gap. You no longer can say Lovid. You no longer would say that it's an extension from one to the other. So this is a significant gap. This is considered a new wall. Rav Amar Ein Amoyel came to Lehave Makam Dal Lechashiv. But Rava says not more, because to be a chashav makam, you need a makam dalet. If it doesn't have a width of a dalet, it's not considered a new wall. It's considered adding on to the existing wall. Rav Simi Masel Lekul, but Rav Simi learned it in a kulitic way. He learned that everybody learns that if there's 3 tvachim, a distance of 3 tvachim, then it helps. It's effective, because that's considered a makam chashav. And if there's also the case where you had the amud, if you had the pillar that was placed in the middle of the somewhere in the carpet to reduce the area, it's also considered effective. He said the machlekes is only if it's less than gimel, but once it's gimel, everyone agrees that it would be effective. The machlekes is if it's even less than gimel. The Gemara is now discussing a way to minimize the size of the carpet. If you have the karpov that's loyhukov to dira, and therefore it can't be more than beis asayim, is another way to reduce the size of it. Doch by tit, so if he coated the walls of the karpov with tit, with mud, and made it thicker, so he made the walls thicker, and therefore that reduces the interior area of the karpov. So doch by tit, v'yochol lama b'fnei atzmai, if it's thick enough that even if it wasn't leaning on the wall, even if it wasn't supported by the wall, in and itself would be thick enough to be like a wall, b'fnei atzma, it would stand on its own, then havimiyah. That certainly is considered a reduction in the interior space of the karpov, and it will reduce the size and permit carrying. That's havimiyah. That's certainly a reduction. But let's say it's not thick enough to stand on its own. Rabba Amar Havimiyad. Rabba says it's a miyad, and Rabba Amar Lei Havimiyad. Rabba says it's not. Rabba Amar Havimiyad, it's considered a miyad, Hashtamiyad Koi. Even though it couldn't stand independently, it needs the support of the existing wall. But Seif Kol Seif, in any event, right now it's standing, so it should be a miyad. Rav Amar Lo Havimiyad, it's not a miyud because came to Lo Yachal Mekam Bifnei Atzma Lav Klomo. He holds that Rava holds that since it could not stand independently, it doesn't have significance. It's not considered significant, and it's not considered something that can reduce the size of the karpov. Now the Gemara is returning to the case that we had before, there where it's a carpet that's more than a base of Saim, Shaloi Hukaf Ladira, it was not made, the Mechitza were not made to surround a residential area. It became a residential area, but now he has to make the Mechitzas to make it for the purpose of a residential area. So we're talking about a case where one of the Mechitzas was was a mound. It was a naturally formed Mechitza. And now he has to make a Mechitza to make it hukaf ladira. So in a similar fashion that we learned before, it depends where he makes this mechitza. Hirchik minatel dalid also mechitza. If he moves 4 tvachim back from the mound, he made a new mechitza hoil. So that helps. It's matrit, because now this is considered to be a new mechitza. It's not considered to be an addition to the mound. It's separated by 4 tvachim. So now it's a mechitza, it's hukaf ladira. Pachas megimal. If it's within 3, so then it's not considered to be a new mechitza, it's just considered to be an addition to the mechitza. Or if you made it on the edge of the mound. So Rav Chisda Ram Nuna Chadamar Hoyal Chadamar Loyal. One says it helps, and the other one says it doesn't. This time the Rav Chisda Hoyal, it's mistaber to say the Rav Chisda is the one who said that it helps. Now, till now we've been going with the assumption that a mechitza al gam mechitza is not effective. However, that is the subject of this machlokes. If one person makes a mechitza on top of another mechitza, Amar Rav Chisda b'Shabbos hoyel. He says b'Shabbos it's considered to be a mechitza, so therefore it is effective in being makiv the karpa l'shem dira. And he can carry it, but b'nichsei ger like kana. But if there's nichsei a ger died, and his possessions are now hefker. If you want to make a kinyan, putting this type of mechitza is not considered to be making a chazaka in the karga. It's not considered to be making a new mechitza. So that does not now enable you to make a kinyan. It's not considered legabe a kinyan at kinyanim to be a complete mechitza, to be a chazaka, but legabe Shabbos it is effective. Rosh Hashanah Omar af b'Shabbos nami lo yoel. And Rosh Hashanah says no, even legabe Shabbos, a mechitza legabe mechitza is not effective. This time, that Rav Chisda is the one that says it helps. Rav Chisda says a moideli Rosh Hashanah. He says Rosh Hashanah says moide, even though he says a mechitza al gam mechitza is not effective, but he's moide shim also mechitza ala tel. But if he makes the mechitza on the tel for the residents to enclose an area of more than a base of saim toward the people on the tel, that it's being used for the tel itself, shahoil. My time hoil ba'av mechitza is hal yonidar. Because people who are residents of the tel, of the mound, so the mechitza encloses them. So that is considered to be mechitza for them because it encloses the people who now they're enclosed, the ones who live on the tel, were the residents on the tel. Now it encloses them. If it's talking about the people on the bottom, just adding on, Rav Sheshes says just adding on to mechitza on top doesn't do anything. But if we're talking about on the tel itself, then Rav Sheshes would be moida that it is effective. Well, let's say we're talking about the case where you have the mechitza al gam mechitza, and at the time you put the mechitza on the mechitza, it was not moil, it was not effective because you have the existing lower part of the mechitza, but then they sunk into the ground. So after they sunk, the addition that he made is now, that is in effect the new mechitza. So now they do accomplish because they are the new mechitza. Do we consider that to be effective or not? So if we're talking about as far as making a chazak ben nechseger, I know the Rav Yirmiyah, well, that is like the halacha of Rav Yirmiyah. The Amar Rav Yirmiyah, Amar Rav Yehuda, Haiman the shaded lift up pillar the ara the ger, a person who throws a turnip into a crack in the ground that belongs to a ger. So the ger died, and now it's hefker. He threw a turnip into the ground. So at the time he put it into the ground, nothing has grown yet. If also Yisrael another yid comes, a Rafik Bey Porta, and he comes and he digs on the ground. So now the second person made a chazaka. He improved the ground. So Basar Kana Kamalai Kana, the second person is kind, but not the first. Not the first. My time, because Beidna the Shada like a Shavach. Even though he was first, but at the time that he threw the turnip in the ground, he didn't improve the ground at that point in time. What only happens later is that Mamela later on, the ground becomes improved when the turnip grows. But and Kiko Shavach Mamela Shavach. When he did improve it, it happens on its own. So therefore, the second person, he made the chazaka. He made a chazaka because his action caused the improvement in the ground. So the second one is kinda, not the first. So here also, even though later on, even though the bottom mechitza sunk and then the top mechitzas are moyal, they're beneficial, but they weren't beneficial at the time when he built those mechitzas, so it shouldn't be kind. So it can't be legabe nefse ger ve'ela. You'll tell me lin Shabbos. That is legay lin Shabbos. So, and therefore the question is the mechitza that he put on top when the bottom one sinks? Do we consider the top one to be a valid mechitza, and therefore does it allow the person to carry in the karpa? So Gemara says, well, what's the shaila? Have a mechitza nasa b'Shabbos. The mechitza was made on its own, but it was made on Shabbos. V'altanya kol mechitza nasa b'Shabbos. A mechitza that was made on Shabbos, bein b'shegi, bein b'mezeh, shmei mechitza, whether it was done b'shegi b'mezeh, but in effect, it is a mechitza. So even though he did an isser, but the mechitza is made. So here also, the mechitza is made on Shabbos. The bottom one sunk. The top ones now are existing. It was a mechitza that was created on Shabbos. We learned the mechitza that was created on Shabbos is shmei mechitza. Gemara says, no, you can't be paishated from that because law itmar law. Didn't we learn on that? Amar Rav Nachman loishan el. Where do we say it's a valid mechitza? That's l'chumra. Therefore, if a person throws from the Rishus Rabbim into this enclosed area where the mechitzas were made on Shabbos, he's chai because it is a Rishus Yachid because it's enclosed by mechitzas. But that's only l'chumra. But avalataltel also. But to permit carrying in this area, it's also. So therefore, the top mechitzas, when the bottom is sunk, they should not be permitted. They should not permit, rather, carrying in the enclosed area. The Gemara says no. Ki itmar the Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman said that lo yishanu ella lizrag. It's only l'chumra, where it's only l'chumra, not l'kula. That's a mezid itmar. That's only if it was done b'mezid. That was only if it was done b'mezid. But if it was not b'mezid, then we say the mechitzas could be mater. They could permit carrying in the enclosed area. So therefore, over here, when the bottom mechitzas sunk, therefore, even though it happened on its own, but lamaisa, now you have an enclosure, it's enclosed area, and it's hukaf ladira, and it should be therefore mutter. It should be mutter to carry in the area. So continuing on with this type of a chazaka, this type of an improvement that happens on its own, it's of the mechitza gam mechitza minachse ager. There was a woman that she put a mechitza, she built on a mechitza on top of an existing mechitza on the land of a ger. He died, it was after, and she did that thinking that this would be a chazaka and she would be able to acquire the land. Also, Gava Rafak Beit Porta. Then subsequently a man came and he plowed a little bit. Also, the coming to Rav Nachman, they came to the entire in front of Rav Nachman, Ike may be all day. He put the land in the hands of the man, that the man is the rightful owner. Also, she started to scream in front of him, but she was first, so she should be kind of. Amrullah, he said to her, "My avilach, what can I do for you? You didn't make a chazaka in the proper way that is supposed to be done, and mechitza l'gabe mechitza is not a proper mechitza."